Hello and welcome to Module 5, Barriers to Web 2.0, my presentation over the reading and my answers to the questions. All right, first step, let's talk about, what did we have to read? We had to read a chapter from a book, and the chapter was about our barriers to using Web 2.0, really, which is just another way of saying modern technologies and the current uses and form of the internet. So what was the chapter all about? Well, the first thing it was about was talking about where technology was at the time in 2012, where these people saw it going, and then what it was going to accomplish. Something, just kind of a quick side note that I thought was really funny or interesting was that some of the things that in 2012 they talked about as big changes in education that were upcoming are things that are in our classrooms right now. So number one, it was very accurate, but number two, it almost seems like we've had these things since then that it's almost like I can't believe there was a time where we had to imagine, that these things were going to shift and make everything magically better in schools, from laptops to tablets and smartboards and everything else. So speaking of those things, those were some of the new technologies as well that in the chapter it talked about. Interactive whiteboards were going to allow students to interact with material, and student response systems were going to be ways to assess student information or learning anyway. Formative and summative assessments, we'd collect that data and then we could do something more meaningful with it. And then obviously the internet, I can remember using the internet back when it was dial-up and new. You just get the discs in the mail, but now we take a lot of that for granted. It just seems like it's everywhere. You can almost go to any store and there's a sign on the door that'll say free Wi-Fi, but at the same time there's still some issues with kids accessing internet even from home. So there's still some room to grow in all those areas. Access to technology, though, most kids, whether they have internet at home or not, still have access to the internet through the form of smartphones and tablets and personal laptops as well. So it seems like every kid who walks in the door is playing some game on the phone now. So times have really changed. I'm always talking about how old I feel like I'm getting. I remember back when I used to beg my parents for a pager, and now every kid walks in with an iPhone. So times have really changed. Unfortunately, the information in the chapter we read also shows us that even though technology has changed, increased access to information is greater than ever before, it's not resulted in any greater test scores. People aren't scoring higher on tests. They're not getting into college at any higher rates. Graduation rates haven't gone up any as a result. And so that's something I think that we really need to look at and try and figure out, because things have not changed for the better as far as what we had hoped it would. All right, moving on. Let's talk about some of the questions or things like that. So what are some excuses that we hear from teachers when it comes to implementation of technology? Well, number one is time. Number two, lack of training. Number three, lack of tech support. Number four, lack of administrative support. And what do those have to do? Well, the first one, lack of time, that one has to do with we need time to implement new technologies, to research technologies, to find best practices, and then figure out ways to incorporate them into our lesson plans. And without built-in time into our school days, we're left to do it on our own time. And many times that's just not going to happen because we have other demands on our time: family, friends, regular lesson planning, grading, collaborating, coaching, whatever else it is that we have to do. Another issue is lack of training. So even if we do have access to technologies, or the school or the district purchases new technology, how do we use that technology? We need to have a training on that, on how to use it, why we should use it, and then be shown the same research that caused it to be purchased in the first place, so that we really have more buy-in and want to use it. Another issue is a lack of tech support. I know, for instance, whenever I have a key pop off a student laptop, or the bulb in my projector goes out, or any number of things goes wrong in my room that has to do with technology, and I call tech support, they answer my phone call. They tell me somebody will call me back in 24 hours. When that person does, they set up a meeting within the next week to come out and get my problem fixed. And sometimes they don't even fix the problem right away. They just come out and then take the laptop or whatever else it is I needed fixed and then tell me they'll bring it back to me when they're done. So does that really help me in the short term if I'm in the middle of projects or presentations and something happens, and then what do? I just can't go forward anymore. So that's something that really frustrates teachers. So a lot of times they'll avoid the use of technology in some cases in order to not have to face those problems. Another issue is the lack of administrative support. And it's not that administrators don't want to help, whether they don't want to help you get technology or training for the technology. It's just that they are overwhelmed with the other demands on their time. I mean, they're dealing with, parents and discipline and community relations and other vision and mission statements set by the district. It's just their time is so strained that sometimes it's hard to find time to give us the support that we need in those areas. All right, now to some of the questions we were asked. The first one, can we find a way to fix the divide, the digital divide? And my answer to that is yes. But as administrators moving forward, we've got to be able to do three things. Number one, we've got to find funding. We've got to be able to get money to find technology and train people. And sometimes that requires us to hire or bring people in from the outside. So it's really important that we find funding. Number two, the training. We have to not only get technology, but the technology that we already have, there are still people that don't use it the way that they could be using it. So instead of just assuming we have to buy new technology right away, sometimes we need to take a step back and think, how can we better train our staff to use what we already do have? And then the last one is collaboration. We need that time built in that we can get together, whether it's in a PLC or some other setting, so that staff can talk to people in their building or other people that they've worked closely with and trust, and bounce ideas off of each other to talk about what's going to work, what's not going to work, how can I adapt it to work better in my room, how can we do this together? And I think those are the most meaningful ways, and that's how most people get really on board, is not being told from an administrator, but being told by peers, hey, this works, give it a shot. Okay, something else that we need to talk about is the skills. Now, so we talked about what teachers need. This is what students need moving forward. And technology is going to allow us to give kids the ability to communicate on a global scale. But with those skills or the ability to do those things, the tools to do them, they need the skills to learn how to communicate in a global economy. How can I be respectful of other cultures, of other people, other races and genders, ethnicities, whatever the case might be, especially people who speak other languages. But at the same time, they've got to figure out, why am I talking to them? How do I talk to them? And then what do I want that end product to be from talking to them? And those are the skills that we need to help work out with the use of technology. Now, in addition to those soft skills, the kids need to have some concrete skills of technology too. And I would break it down into three things. Number one, I would break it down into knowing what is on the inside of a computer. What is the difference between memory and storage? What is RAM? What is a hard drive? What is, all these things. And how does technology function? And then move them to the step two, which is, once I know how it functions, how can I make it function for me? So coding, creating programs, designing software. These are skills that are going to allow kids to go a long way as they move out of the high school setting. And then third would be, how do I take those first two things and then create a product, whether it's robotics or machinery or architecture or art or anything else. I've got to be able to put it all together to come up with something in the end, and I think that's going to be a really important skill as well. Okay, the impact of the global economy. For me, I'm just going to stick with just education. I know I could talk about, all kinds of things in my personal life, but talking just about administrative roles in the future and what it does for me currently as a teacher. Number one, it helps me plan better. I have access to more materials, more examples, more research and things that are going to help me come up with best practices. Number two, it helps me collaborate with my peers outside of my school day, just like students do when they're outside of the classroom. It's also given me ability to see, again, other teacher examples from across the globe, across the country, to see kind of what works and what doesn't. And then lastly, it just put a lot more tools in my toolbox, my teacher toolbox, if there's things that I need, if there's questions I have, I can get online and look it up. If I come up with an idea and I think, hey, it would be awesome to try this, a lot of times there's already programs or software that will do that, and I'm able to find it online. So these things have really enabled me to open up my own teaching to become a better teacher, a more engaging teacher, and probably in the eyes of students more relevant. Okay, what kind of training do I need? Well, as a future administrator, I would have to say that while I feel like I'm really comfortable with technology because I'm always using it, I'm researching it, I'm reading new articles all the time, I'm always trying new things out. I need to have a shift of mindset from being a consumer of that information and those technologies to finding a way to produce lists and data and research myself that I then distribute to others, to my staff one day, to get them to want to use technology in their own classrooms. Another thing that would be really important, I think, would be to get some more training on subject areas outside of my own. How does a history class look versus a math class versus a science, and so on and so forth, so that I can better, equip my staff and teachers with, ideas on how to move forward with technology, not just the ELA department, which I'm most familiar with. Some of the tech that we currently have in my building, I've been fortunate enough to have here in Kansas, would be laptops. There are laptop carts in every hall of the building. In 8th grade, there's 2 halls, 2 and 7, 2 and 6. The 6 through 8 in my building. So that's 30 laptops per hallway times 6. You can do the math. That's quite a few laptops for us to have access to. It's nowhere near 1-to-1, but I would say maybe 1-to-4 or something like that. So it's still useful, especially when you have a class set that we can move from room to room. Every room has interactive whiteboards as well that helps with lessons, so teaching, showing information, having kids come up and interact with that information. Color printers is a big one. Some people kind of laugh at me when I talk about that, but actually having access to color printers for kids is huge, because to make posters, to make infographics, to make pamphlets and handouts, and we've even written restaurant menus before. So we talk about lots of different type of writing styles and purpose for those things, and then creating a product that the kids can actually see in color kind of really makes them excited. A new technology that just came in the building just this last year in our Museum Connections class, I haven't had a chance to use them, but are some VR headsets. He got a class set donated to him of 30 VR headsets that he's been using to do some virtual field trips and things. So it's really interesting stuff. Okay, some of the advantages of technology, Web 2.0, whatever you want to call it. The first one would be increased ability, I would say, to have individualized instruction. Taking data and information about student achievement and then finding where their gaps are, and then being able to form new lessons, new units, things based just for that student in order to get them to reach their goals and accomplish things that we may have been able to accidentally overlook in the past. Another thing would be meaningful application of skills. So how, if I'm learning the difference between types of persuasion in writing class, what does that do with anything? Well, we've done videos, commercials, we've done public service announcements, brochures, things like that, where kids have had to come up with different ways to apply those skills. Technology has really made a big difference with that. It's helped kids and students both. We talked about this a little bit before with collaboration, some other soft skills as well, giving feedback to one another, having meaningful information, go back and forth, switch between hands, and talk about those types of issues. So, and then the last one would be just collection of data, whether it's for a teacher to look back on their own instruction, or as a building to look at test scores to see where you're going. I'm going to try and pick it up a little bit. I'm running out of time. So disadvantages of Web 2.0, distraction for students. You see, for most of you, you know what that picture is, a fidget spinner. And that's the same for cell phones and other things. A lot of times they're playing video games or looking at sites maybe they're not supposed to be or shouldn't be. Access outside of school, most kids have it. Not every kid does. There's not a guarantee. So we want everybody to be on a level playing field. Funding is a big one, and then just prioritizing technology sometimes is a stopper there. And then some of the problems that I've experienced is cyberbullying, Kids have taken pictures of each other in inappropriate ways and times. There's been some sexual harassment and things. And then also bullying on social media.